This is the Leica X1, a 12 megapixel APS-C compact camera with a fixed 36mm equivalent lens, built-in flash, full manual controls, and of course, that iconic red dot. But unlike most other Leica cameras that require you to open up your web browser, type how to become a sugar baby, and really follow through with the instructions just to be able to buy one, this one is actually very affordable. In fact, this is quickly being labelled as the cheapest Leica you can buy. How cheap, I hear you ask? Well, we'll get onto how much I pay for this thing in just a minute, but for now, you might be a little bit skeptical, because if this thing really is so cheap, then it can't be any good. Can it? Well, let's start by looking at the build and handling, because if you've ever owned a proper Leica M camera, or even held one in a camera store for just a little bit too long, prompting the sales assistant to politely ask you to leave the store, not speaking from experience of course, then you'll already know just how insanely high quality those things can be. So let me start by setting some expectations right from the get-go. This one doesn't quite hit that level, but it's not a million miles off. Don't get me wrong, the chassis is high quality aluminium, the dials are all metal, and overall it does feel pleasantly solid, but this camera was clearly made with portability in mind, so it'd certainly be classed as a lightweight Leica, and you can certainly feel that trade-off. Now, that's not an entirely bad thing, because compacts like this are meant to be pocketable and portable, and that's kind of the whole point, so this thing certainly fits the bill. So much so, in fact, that I actually ended up taking this with me on my recent trip to the Sony Kando event in Seattle, Washington. And thankfully, because this thing is just so small, it did manage to slip into my jeans pocket for the duration of the trip to ensure that I had it with me at all times, and also to keep it out of the prying eyes of Daddy Sony so he wouldn't get mad. Don't hurt me, Papa. But whilst I was out and about shooting with this camera, I did realise just how slippery this little thing is. Now, that's mainly thanks to any lack of front grip here, and I'd imagine if you're into shooting naked, oiled up street photography, which, come on, we've all tried it out in college at least once, then that could become a bit of a problem. Now, once I got home from my trip, I did actually do some research, and I found this nice third-party wooden grip on Amazon for relatively cheap, which I kind of wish I'd bought in advance, because I'm sure that would help a lot. But obviously, I'm not that smart, and I do tend to prefer to keep things nice and simple and just travel with a handy wrist strap like this one from PGY Tech. Anyway, I'll leave links to this strap and the grip that I found in a pinned comment below if it helps anyone. One thing I particularly like about this are the controls. They're Leica through and through, minimalist and intuitive. There are just two dials on the top here, one for shutter speed and the other one to control the aperture. That's it. I mean, sure, it does have a proper hot shoe port, which is nice, and there is an adorable little pop-up flash that you can click in and out, great for destroying somebody's retinas as soon as the sun goes down. I appear to have broken it. I will fix that later. Pretend that didn't happen. Anyway, speaking of spending money, I won't keep you in suspense for much longer. Let's now discuss how much I actually paid for this camera, because I know the phrase cheap Leica sounds about as believable as trustworthy politician or affordable Taylor Swift tickets, but stick with me, okay? So, I managed to pick up this little camera in near mint condition, minus the damage I've just done, from a Japanese auction for just under 84,400 yen, which is about $570 US. And if you know anything about Leica, that is a seriously low price, especially when you consider that other Leica compacts, like many of the deluxe cameras for example, were all made in collaboration with Panasonic. This was the first compact that Leica made all by itself, so this is a true Leica camera, not just a Lumix in drag. But I should also mention at this point that the way I managed to bag that deal is all thanks to the help of Baiyi, who have also been kind enough to sponsor this episode. Now, although they are the sponsor of this episode, I do genuinely use Baiyi a lot on this channel when hunting down older cameras, and that's because most of the time I can get them way cheaper than I would do here on the North American market. Baiyi allows you to browse Japanese auction sites like Yahoo Auctions, Mercari, and Rakuten, all translated into English or a choice of other languages. Once you win a bid, Baiyi will handle the rest, including inspecting the product to make sure it's legit, packaging it up securely, and forwarding the item straight to your doorstep. It's super easy to use, completely free to browse, and they even ship worldwide, so if you want to check it out for yourself, I've dropped a link in the pinned comment below. But anyway, what's this thing actually like to shoot with? Well, in true Leica fashion, the X1 is slow, and I don't mean just in an emotionally unavailable kind of way, I actually mean physically, borderline frustratingly slow. The autofocus is very sluggish by today's standards, and like most Leica cameras, it feels like this wasn't designed for anyone who's in any kind of hurry. This kind of camera forces you to slow down and just let the camera do its thing whilst you enjoy a nice peaceful photo walk. And honestly, whilst being surrounded by the beauty of the Pacific Northwest, using this camera actually felt, well, pretty enjoyable. For some reason, I never found myself getting mad with this camera, despite how slow it is. Maybe it's because I was in a zen-like state because of the nature and all of that, or maybe it's just because this camera isn't overcomplicated like a lot of cameras can be these days. That simplicity really does allow you to just embrace the joy of shooting. It's almost soothing in a grandma's kitchen kind of way. It feels familiar, safe, and smells a bit like old cheese. You know what I mean? Let's talk about this lens quickly, because whilst this does retract in and out whilst you turn it on and off, perhaps fooling you into thinking this has some sort of zoom on it, this is actually a fixed 24mm f2.8 lens. It's roughly a 36mm equivalent in full frame terms. Inside it's got a leaf shutter, which is quiet and oddly satisfying to shoot with. The rendering is just lovely. I mean, it's not clinically sharp, but it does feel good, like in a kind of romantic way. It gives your images that slightly imperfect, creamy character that modern glass tends to sand down.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
Now behind the glass is what I think makes this camera more unique. You see, this is one of the few compact cameras out there that actually has a large APS-C size sensor. And I should know because I've been on a bit of an APS-C compact binge at the moment, and this is certainly one of the more memorable ones. Sure, it might only spit out 12 megapixel files, but I find that that's still plenty of resolution for capturing most casual types of photography or for posting on social media. Just maybe don't go too wild with the cropping. This camera can also capture files in both RAW and or JPEG, and it actually comes packed with a handful of film style finishes, complete with some basic customization options like sharpening, saturation and contrast, which is great if you prefer to dodge the post-processing work altogether and just shoot images straight out of the camera. Now, whilst the color modes that it offers are kind of nice, I personally enjoyed using the black and white mode the most, and that way I had some nice mono images straight out of the camera, and then I could also work up the color DNG RAW files later on if I wanted to, which, as it turns out, is exactly what I did, because all of the shots you're seeing right now on screen have been processed using my own custom Lightroom presets, which are available to purchase from my website. I even made a brand new preset specifically for this trip to Seattle, originally named Seattle, just to avoid any confusion, and that's the preset that I've gone with predominantly for these edits here. Now, if you happen to like what you see and you want 10% off this preset so you can buy it for yourself, check out the link in the pinned comment below so that you can save some money, support the channel, feed my gas problem, and maybe feed my children too if there's some money left over, you know, because priorities. Anyway, this wouldn't be a fair and balanced review if we got too swept up in all of the romanticism of everything and didn't discuss the cons, because inevitably it's not all good news. First of all, there's the topic of video capture, as in it has none, like nothing, not even 720p, which for me personally really isn't that much of a concern because I bought this thing with the sole intention of using it as a pocketable travel camera. But sadly, there isn't an EVF and the screen on the back is fixed in place, so composing your shots can get a little bit awkward at times, particularly when you're shooting from high or low angles. Also, this thing only accepts SD cards that are 32 gigabytes or smaller, so your fancy 1 terabyte SD card from the future is no good here, I'm afraid. Again, I don't think that's a deal breaker, but just something to be made aware of. One other thing is also the potential issue that comes with this little battery port on the bottom here. Apparently, this plastic catch inside the door is notorious for breaking, so if you are on the hunt for one, make sure that you get one with a functioning battery door, or this could cause you some issues. And apparently the flash breaks as well. Again, my fault, but ugh. But what happens if you're tempted by this X1 but you're worried that the slow performance might make you want to drink bleach? Well, the good news is that they did actually make a Leica X2, which followed on in 2012. That camera uses the same lens and sensor combo, but the AF is reported to be much faster, well, relatively speaking. The drawback, of course, is that you will usually need to pay quite a bit more for the X2 because it's newer, which for me personally wasn't really worth it, but it might be for you, which is all that really matters here. But either way, I think it's fair to say at this point that the X1 isn't perfect. It's slow, it's old, and it's limited to shooting photos only, when it feels like it. But I also think that's a huge part of this camera's charm. It's simple, it's soulful, it's elegantly made, and just about the only Leica you can buy without having to sell feet pictures to strangers on the internet, which for me at least is a welcome change.